Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Bonsais Forever. My name is Jay. I am going to do a video on sarissas today. The sarissa japonica or japonica, or however you feel like pronouncing it, I guess. I've heard so many different ways. Its common name is a tree of 1,000 stars. So I have two different varieties of this tree, and I'm going to focus on the long leaf variety today. I have several pieces that I'm going to demonstrate some stuff for you guys. I'm going to do some pruning. I'm going to talk about care levels, temperatures, watering, that kind of stuff. And I'm also going to show you the other variety just so you can have a basis of what each one of them looks like. And then I'm going to go into pruning and stuff like that. So first off, I'm going to show you this tree here. This is one of this is one of my oldest sarissas that I have. I did this. This is a cutting from my original tree. I still have that one. I did a video on that one not too long ago. That was episode 1 of how to take care of your bonsais. So go check that one out. I did some teaching on that video. I've had a lot of questions on these trees and how to take care of them, and my tree's doing this and what should I do for that, and so I'd like to just go over in a little bit more detail on how to take care of these trees. When I first got this tree, I had no idea how to take care of it. I watched videos. There's a bonsai artist and YouTuber, Nigel Saunders. He lives up in Canada, and he has one that looks like a African acacia tree. And I've watched him work on that tree for a long time, and I thought that was really cool, so that's why I got one. So mine are obviously different. This doesn't look like an acacia tree. I like the root over rock with this. When I planted this on a rock, I'm trying to remember, I think it's been about 6 years ago. Some close to that, maybe going on to 7 years ago. When I planted it on this rock, it was about this size. I'm going to go over this tree a little bit later on, but it was about this size. So the trunk, not any bigger than my pinky, some little bitty branches, and it was kind of sparse like this tree. How I did the root over rock was I took a little tree and I put it in a deep garden pot, one of those plastic pots that you find in a garden center. And it was a larger pot, so it made the root base about yay big, and it made it deep. So the roots, as they grow down first. They get long and leggy. They're like, I'll show you one of the trees. I'm going to repot it for you guys so you can see the roots and how they look when it's in potting soil versus bonsai soil. I don't have any that need repotted right now that are in bonsai soil, I don't think. So I don't think I'm going to do that today, but I will show you from potting soil, because this one's in some potting soil, and this one I can repot and get it going a little bit better in some bonsai soil. So one thing that people ask a lot is temperatures, and can I keep it inside? Should I keep it outside? That kind of thing. And these trees do well both inside and outside. So their temperature requirements are no less than 50 degrees. They start suffering pretty quickly at 45 degrees, 30 degrees. It's pretty much game over. Their leaves are relatively thin leaves, so they are a tree that likes a lot of water. So I'll go into the watering portion of it. So they have very fine roots, feeder roots. And they have very fine feeder roots in potting soil and the bonsai soil. They do grow thicker roots as they mature, but their feeder roots are very thin and very, very hair-like. And I've showed that before in repotting the other tree. I'll show you again in this tree. So if you want to see what it looks like from bonsai soil to bonsai soil, go check out the other video. Like I said, it's episode 1, how to take care of your bonsais, sarissa japonica. So to keep them watered properly, you want the soil to be evenly moist. You don't want it sopping wet continuously, and you don't want to let it dry out. You let it dry out and it starts suffering really quickly. I have an example of what it kind of looks like when it needs watered. So you can see this branch right here is starting to fall over. The leaves are still green, they're still nice, but they're starting to fall over. If I let this go another day, maybe even half the rest of today, because it's still morning time, these ones will start drooping even more. And so that's how you can tell. The fresh new growth at the tips of the branches will start drooping when it needs water. Now I'm going to repot this one, so that's why I've let it dry out a little bit, and I'll go into that a little bit later. So when we're talking about trimming the trees and maintaining a profile as a bonsai tree, you want to keep the shape of the tree. You create the shape of the tree, and then you want to maintain the shape of the tree. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at where the shape of the tree is. This one is still in development. It's only 6 years old, so I've got a basic shape of the tree, but it does need to be wrinkled back into shape, because this stuff out here is hanging out a lot farther than I want it to. It's a lot taller than I want it. Right now it's getting ready to go into the growing season. You can see these are all brand new tips here. This is old growth right in here. The darker leaves are old growth. So it's getting ready to shoot out, and these things grow really rapidly when they grow. So if I cut this back now, it'll give room for all the new growth to fill into the actual shape of the tree, and then I can maintain that throughout the year. If I let this go, then I have to hard prune it and cut larger branches back, and I really don't want to do that, because it takes away from the flowing aesthetic of the tree and the natural look of the taper of the tree. So first branch that I'm going to trim for you guys is this guy here. So this is way outside of the profile. Like this is where I want the profile to be. It's back here. So this is way outside of the profile. These trees naturally back bud on old wood. So I've got a bud right about here where my fingers are on this branch. So I'm going to cut it back to that bud. And I've heard other bonsai artists say that you want to be careful cutting it back to one bud, because if that bud dies, that branch dies. So, and that is very true, and I've had that happen many times in my experiences with growing trees, different trees, even these ones. So this branch does only have one bud on it, but if you look right here, this is kind of the end of this branch going up here. So if this dies, it's not going to damage the look of the tree, but if it does live, it could enhance it. So I'm also going to trim here. There is 2 buds here. So I want to try and not trim it back to 1, but if I need to, I can, I guess is what I'm saying here. So I'm just going to go ahead and go through and cut back everything that needs to be cut back. And right now, as it's getting ready to start pushing new growth, or as it's pushing new growth, is a good time to give a good hard prune. I don't really want to do like a shrub pruning where I just chop all of it back. It works on these trees, that actually does work, but I just don't like doing that, so I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to go back, and I am going to cut these back pretty far. This one has a bud here and a bud here, but I'm going to cut it back to this one. Now, one thing that I've learned about these trees is when you give it a really hard pruning, it takes a little bit for it to start growing again. So if your tree is healthy and you don't need to cut back, like this whole branch died, it might have been against the side of the greenhouse this winter and this part got too cold. or it might have been shaded out or something. I don't know for sure, but I'm gonna cut it back to. I'm looking at this one. I might actually just take this whole. No, I'm not gonna take the whole branch off. Thinking I might take the whole branch off. I'm gonna take the end off and I'm gonna look at it a little bit to see if that's what I want to do. But I'm gonna cut it back to live growth right here because this is all dead. So I'm cutting it back to the live growth. And then I'm gonna look it over as I continue, because I might take this piece off because this branch flows up this way and it's coming out in this section. And I also have another branch coming off here that could fill in this section. And that can fill in pretty quickly if it doesn't have something impeding it. So talking about it, I think I might just take that branch off. But I'm gonna go ahead and, for the most part, I'm gonna cut back a couple of nodes past where I want the profile to be on this tree so that it'll grow into the profile rather than getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which obviously it's a tree, it's going to get bigger and bigger, but as we maintain it, we can keep it small and let it grow bigger very slowly, by trimming it, by maintaining it, and by cutting it back, and by taking out branches that aren't doing very well. Like this one is not doing so good. It's got a lot of dead stuff on there. There's some new growth, but that branch is impeding this whole area right here, and it's growing straight up, and I don't really want that. These trees can be wired, so later on, if I'd like to wire some of this out, I don't believe I've ever actually wired any of my sarissa trees just because I've never really needed to. So I know that it can be done, it's just I've never done it. So it's not a hard process, and it doesn't take forever to cut these back to maintain their shape. But like any other bonsai tree, it does take maintenance. It does take a little bit of effort to keep it in shape. My scissors are squeaky. So as we go back and get this back into the proper profile, these trees, like I said, are quick growers. So you're going to have to go back and do this a couple of times throughout the year to maintain the shape of the tree. And right this minute, this guy is not flowering. It's probably going to be getting ready to here pretty soon. And as it's flowering, if you go back and watch as the flowers die off, if you go back and cut off where the flower was, each time it has a flower, just cut that piece off after the flower dies or falls off. It will continue to grow the foliage, and it'll grow new buds. Like right here is actually a bud that you can see. It's getting ready to start a flower here. See if I can get you in there close enough to see it. Where are we at? There we are. So right there is a bud for a flower, and then you can see right here, that is where a flower was, and we want to cut that off so that it will provide a space for a new flower to grow. Because if you leave those on there, you'll have to go back and trim a whole entire tree back all at one time to keep it from losing all its leaves, because eventually it'll start getting longer and longer internodes, and like this one has got a really long internode. That's really long compared to this one, where that's the length of the internode from there to the tip of the scissors, and then you've got this one that's like almost the whole blade length. So the more regularly you maintain it, the shorter the internodes are and the fuller the tree looks. Well, the fuller the tree will become. Like this branch, I didn't take the flowers off, so I have to cut this branch clear back to here because that won't grow new growth because the ends of the branches are where the flowers are, and that'll stop growing new foliage. So I'm going to cut these back pretty far here to maintain the profile. Like this one, it has the same thing with the flower buds on there. Actually, this whole section. Except, believe me, sometimes you get busy and you can't get to your trees on time, and it's not going to be a huge issue as long as you do get to them and get back to maintaining them. Because these do recover pretty quickly from major pruning. The biggest thing with doing a major pruning, and sometimes they'll drop some leaves, sometimes they will look like they're dying, and they're not. These trees are really, really hardy. Then I'll definitely talk a little bit about repotting, when to repot, all that here in just a minute. This tree is almost good. Just want to make sure and get the branches that are growing out of the profile here. And this one's completely out. I'm going to cut it back to this and let that be the top of the tree. Or top of this branch anyway. So sometimes these trees grow, they'll grow back buds in on the trunk of the tree. One thing you can do, like right here, it grows out of the roots and it'll grow out of old wood. So the ones that are coming out of the roots, I always cut those off because they'll eventually start growing faster than the rest of the tree, and they'll take all the nutrients because they're right on top of the roots. So they have first dibs on nutrients. So you can grab them and just pull them off if you catch them early enough, or if you can't catch them, or if you don't catch them early enough, you gotta cut them off with your scissors. But just remember that the ones that are on the roots are going to grow a lot faster than the rest of the tree. And then you'll have another tree hanging off the roots. Maybe that's cool, maybe that's not for you. So just keep that in mind. Alright, so this looks like a pretty decent profile for this tree. Cut this one back to here. Cut that paint off, there we go. This one off. Of course, you can go around and around and around and keep pruning and pruning, so be careful not to go too far, but these trees do pretty well with pruning. One thing with going too far, if you have a tree that is well established like this tree is, and it's got a lot of growth, a lot of branches, a lot of leaves, pruning off a considerable amount isn't really going to hurt the tree. If you have one or two branches, you don't want to do really hard pruning. You want to let the tree get some branching going before you do some really hard pruning on it. I'm looking for that branch that I was thinking about. This one. This is the one I was thinking about removing. I think I'm going to leave that branch. It looks okay. Yeah, that branch looks okay. It's adding to the aesthetic of the tree here. Later on, I might take it off because it is kind of thicker. I might let, like this branch right here, probably let this branch grow and then cut this branch off to that branch once this one starts getting some size to it. All right, so this tree is back to a reasonable shape. It's still kind of odd looking, but it definitely needs to grow in. This tree had some issues this summer from not being pruned. So this is me getting it back into shape from not pruning it when I should have. So sometimes you have to let them grow, cut them back a little bit, let them grow, cut them back a little bit to get them back into shape, because I do want this to fill in. I want this section right here to fill in a little bit so that it's more of an even canopy. I don't want it to be a flat, all one piece type of thing. I don't want it to be like a flat top haircut or anything, but I want it to have separate pieces, but I do want this section to fill in a little bit more. So I'm going to set this aside. Then I'm going to bring over another project that I've got. This one was a tree that I had growing outside in a big nursery pot, and it started actually growing through the pot because it was on the ground, so it started growing through the base of the pot into the ground. And this tree went from a piece about, I don't know, I think it was about this big, tree about this big, but it was in a big pot, so because I wanted it to get big. And this tree got about 4 feet tall in one summer. So like I said, these things grow really, really fast. And then I thought, hey, this is cool. I can just throw this into a bonsai pot. And it was right in the middle of the summer, and it was really hot outside. And these trees, like I said, you have to keep these trees evenly moist and keep them watered properly so that they don't dry out, because they do not like to be dry. And this branch was right here. It was the one that was really tall. It came out kind of like this, but on the other side it looked pretty good. And it died back really, really hard. And I thought that I was going to lose it. Had this branch, or these couple of branches here, were from the original tree here. This branch and the trunk, all of this, actually this one was part of it too. All the rest of this growth is from just letting it grow back out. So these trees are really hardy, but they are a little finicky. So they do like to have plenty of water and plenty of humidity. Now I kept it outside, and it was in the greenhouse this whole time. So the greenhouse is, I try to maintain it above 50 degrees. This summer, if you've been watching, or this winter, if you've been watching my videos, you know that the greenhouse did get below 30 degrees a couple of nights, because it's just, the greenhouse is wearing out and I need to redo some stuff on it so that it can stay warm. But anyway, it did get too cold, and this tree did suffer a little bit from that also. I got some discolored leaves, and this branch is like really leggy branch here from that. Pulling the weeds while I'm talking. Keep moving forward. So they don't do well in the cold. This whole section right here died from the cold. But what I wanted to talk about with this tree is, if you just maintain the watering on the tree while it looks like it's dying, don't cut everything off, don't cut all the branches off, leave as much foliage as you can for photosynthesis and to regain some health of the tree. It will recover. How you can tell this tree is dead is it looks like this. This is definitely a dead branch. It's completely dried out. It's kind of obvious when it's dead. Like, these leaves are completely brown. They don't turn brown if they're alive, but this branch here, it's got brown leaves on it, and it's got green leaves also. So I guess what I'm getting at is don't jump ahead of yourself in taking everything off of the tree that looks dead right away on these trees. If you're working on some other trees, that's actually a really good idea to do that, because it gives it gives the tree a chance to regrow from a different spot. These trees aren't like that. They will continue to grow, and they'll back bud out, and then the dead branches, you can go back and take those off later. They don't die back into the tree because they're dead. So the ficus benjaminas is something I really enjoy working with. I've done a lot of videos on those. If you don't cut those back when they've froze, they'll continue to die back into the tree, die back into the trunk, die back into the roots, and it's dead. These don't do that. And this is a good example of they don't do that. So what I'm doing with this one now is I'm going to go through and I'm going to take off some of the unnecessary foliage on this tree, like the branches growing out of the trunk of the tree here. I don't really want these lower branches here. I'm going to leave this branch. I'm going to take this one off, because I think I want to grow some more branches, if I can get that one, to make the tree not look two-dimensional, because right now it's a stick going this way and a stick going this way, so I don't want that. I want it to start growing outwards, so that's why I'm going to leave this branch over here too. And like I said, they grow out of old wood. This is old wood here and here. But I do want to cut it back to 1 and a 2, because these trees, like I said, it grows just a whole row of branches here. So I don't want that on this tree. I'm going to leave this little branch because it can grow out into this space here. I'm going to take off every couple of branches here. I'm going to leave the ones on the side of the primary branch, take the ones off the top of the branch. So anything that's on the side, I'm going to leave that because I want it to grow out. But I don't want it to grow up. And like I said earlier, these things do backbud pretty awesome. Very, very readily out of old wood. So maintaining or trimming back isn't a bad thing, but you definitely want to have enough on there for the tree to produce more than it needs so that it can increase. It has to produce more energy than it needs to be able to increase in size and strength. So if you continuously cut it back and cut it back and cut it back, and you don't have a whole lot of foliage, it will definitely kill the tree. There we go. And this basically, what this is doing, and taking the stuff off that's growing upwards. If you have 2 branches growing in the same spot, taking the weaker branch off increases the health of this branch, and taking the rest of this stuff will increase the health of the smaller branches too. But if you take everything off, then there's nothing to increase anything, and the tree will definitely suffer. So more is better. And this branch here, I will eventually cut this one back probably to here once these branches gain some vigor, because there is still stuff on the end of that's producing vigor for the tree. And then these ones, I'm going to let these ones run and grow really long, because that'll thicken up the lower part of the branch and give it some more structure right here to create a canopy here and then a canopy here, and then we'll make it meet in the middle eventually. So that's that for that tree. Pull the weeds and then just maintain the growth that it has, but I want to keep as much on it as possible. to maintain the health of the tree or to increase the health of the tree. So there's that guy. All right, so let's get to the repot portion of this video here. Grab my tray like I always do, and we're going to take this out of the potting soil here. Like I said, I let this one dry out for a couple of days, kind of on purpose, kind of not on purpose. Decided that because it was dry, I'm going to do the video now and not wait until later to do this. So I'm going to pull the weeds out of this and put that in compost. And then I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to cut the top part of this soil off, not cut the roots. I'm going to save this moss. For the next pot that I put it in. And I'm just getting just under the surface of the soil to get the moss off. This moss may or may not survive. It is pretty dry. The moss out here is pretty hardy, so adding a little bit of water to it should revive it. Alright, so the next, you want to get the soil out of the roots, and I want to show you the base of the tree. This is what I mean by very fine hair-like roots. I'll bring you in a little bit closer, I think. Yeah, I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer so you can see the roots on this. No, wrong way. There we go. So you can see these roots are very fine. Very, very fine. And then you've got really thick roots in there amongst that. Like these guys. And in potting soil, these roots grow long and put out few feeder roots. Like very few feeder roots per long root. So like you can tell, it's growing like all around and all around and all around this. And this is all one root right here. And you can see it's got the tiny little hair-like roots, but it's a really long root. So this can be cut off in this instance because I'm not going to do a root over rock with this tree. If I decided later on that I wanted to, I could take it out of the bonsai pot, put it in a training pot, and then just grow the roots really long. They're pretty simple with that. I'm going to zoom back out for you. Okay, so then we're going to take off the top layer of soil first, because I want to find the body of this tree. I want to find where the roots start on this tree. And this tree, I hope it's obvious, this is a cutting from one of my other trees. If not, this is a cutting from one of my other trees. So you can see that it's got really fine hair-like roots on the surface of the tree also. And then there's a solid root right there. I don't want to break through it. I want to cut the roots where I want them to be cut. And these trees, you can bare root them to repots if you have a place that you can keep them moist and warm. Not super hot, and you can't let them get cold. During the summer months, bare rooting them is more difficult because you have to maintain the water, like constantly maintain the water on these things. And I've heard both ways to water right away and not water right away. I have always watered right away after I repot one of these, and I've had very high success with that. I don't remember if I've lost any trees after repotting. I'm trying to think in my head right now if I have lost any trees right after repotting or not. And tell you honestly, I don't think I have. And it's because I water them right away. And also because I try to take off as few roots as possible when I cut the roots back. But I am going to cut off the ends of the really long roots like this so that it fits in my bonsai pot. And I'm going to take off the very bottom now, because this right here is the top root of the tree, and then there's another one right here that's the top. I don't have anything off this side yet that's substantial, but I've got a couple of really nice feeder roots right here that are growing on this side, and I've got a couple of really nice feeder roots on this side that will thicken up and turn into the nabari of this tree. So that's the soil that I'm going to take off. You can see what I mean. They're very, very fine roots, and this is what I was talking about by the thicker roots. And these are really solid. They're really springy roots. So you can use those pretty easily for doing root over rocks with these trees. They do very well with it. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut the very bottom off of this. And I am cutting through some roots, and just look right here. This is a very substantial root coming out of the bottom of this tree. And I do believe this is one that goes clear over to here. It goes here. And then this root goes over the top of it to the back. So I'm going to move this root. And if you bend them too far, they will break off. These roots break really easily. So I'm going to try and move this to the back, and I'm going to plant it like this. As long as I don't bend it past the joint right there where it joins to the trunk, it shouldn't break off. But I can bend it back like that when I plant it in the bonsai pot to make it go this direction instead of over the top of this larger root. But going back to this larger root, this is really, really big. It's got like very few feeder roots on the end of it. So I'm going to cut it back here, and there's feeder roots on here. I'm going to cut it right here, take the end of that off, and this will grow new roots out of it. And then I've got this root that goes across here, and it looks like it's kind of going straight out from the trunk. It kind of looked like for a second that it was going at an angle, but it looks like it is going straight out from the trunk, so that one will be okay. So that's kind of what we've got for roots at the moment. Put all that in the compost, and then this is the pot that I'm going to use for it, and it fits perfectly fine in there. And then this root is the root that I wanted to bend, so I'm going to bend this back around, and I'm going to put it on the other side right there, and then I'm going to kind of twist the tree to keep it straight here, going down into the pot. That's how I'm going to repot it like that. And these trees, they like a finer soil. They can grow in a coarse bonsai soil, but they really like the finer soil. So that's why I've been using this size soil lately. I am mixing it myself. I get a bag of turfus, pumice, and lava rock. And I get all of my stuff on Amazon because it's just easier that way. I haven't found a place out here in my area that sells turfus and pumice, or lava rock for that matter, in this area. So I have to order everything. And then I'm just going to fill in around the sides of it to start off with. And I'm pushing it down into the soil, or down into the pot to hold it into the pot. Getting soil all the way around it. And then I'm going to chopstick the soil into it. And I'm going to push the soil into the potting soil also. I'm going to push the chopstick into the potting soil and work the bonsai soil into it. And that actually helps to transition the tree from potting soil to bonsai soil. And I'm not going to worry about these roots that are poking up just yet. we'll cut those off later, or if I can push them down into the soil and bury them, we'll do that too. So one thing that I've noticed with repotting trees is if you wire the tree in to the pot, then later on you have to take the wire off of the tree, and I really just don't like doing that. But if you don't do that and the tree falls out of the pot, you have a really high chance of losing the tree. So I have actually really started to wire the trees into the pot more often than I used to. So I'm going to grab a couple of pieces of wire here, and I'm going to go backwards on this because this is kind of the second step to getting your pot ready rather than the third step. First step would get your pot, put the screen in it, put the wire in it, put the tree in it, put soil in it. So I'm on step 4 instead of step 2. So by doing it this way, I kind of screw up, but it can still be done. I kind of wanted just to show you that it can still be wired into the pot even after you have the tree in there. You don't have to take it back out. Just push the wire up through the screen. Because I use house screen in the bottom of my pots. I didn't show you guys that on this one, but I've shown you many other times that's how I like doing it. And then we'll put it over the top of the root ball and we'll twist it on. And I'll use a pair of pliers. I've got a little bitty pair of pliers here. And I'll push down with my finger on the root base and pull up nice and firm, but not too hard on the wire to get it tight. You don't want it so tight that it breaks the wire, but you want it tight enough that you can lift the tree up and the pot, something this size anyway, not something large. So maybe I just won't even say that. Basically, you just want the wire to hold the tree in the pot. That's the whole purpose of this, to keep the tree from coming out of the pot before the roots are established. So that's what this is for, is to keep the tree set to establish roots in the pot. Once the roots are established, the tree's going to stay in the pot. It's actually sometimes difficult to get the tree out of the pot once it's established into the pot. So I'm going to go over the top of this larger root, and I'm going to be careful not to damage the root because, like I said, these trees grow really quickly and the roots grow pretty quickly. So if I damage the root, the wire will get absorbed by the root. So I don't want to do that. I just want to make sure that it stays. Kind of what I was saying, if you have a small tree like this, no soil in there, you should be able to pick up the pot with the tree trunk. I don't recommend that with something that's larger or ceramic pots or anything like that, but basically it should be able to. It should be able to. Not that you should. I guess that's what I'm saying. You shouldn't try it, but it should be able to hold it in. You can wiggle the tree, and this tree is solid in the pot, so it's good. And then we put more soil over the top. It's really good to wire your trees into the pots if you live in a windy area. Also, you don't want to... I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I hope that you guys can understand what I'm saying with all this information that I'm throwing out there. When you repot a sarissa, you want to keep it someplace cool but warm and moist. So having it in a like in your house or in a greenhouse is ideal for right after you repot it until you see a substantial amount of new growth. Because the tree, if you repot it and trim the roots, it's possible that you're going to lose some foliage. It's possible you could lose some branches, but they do grow back. If you slip pot it, which would basically be I pull it out of this pot. I clean the very edges of the roots and I put it in this pot. I don't cut anything off except the very edges. That's called slip potting. Then it survives easier, but sometimes you got to trim the roots. I mean, that's why we repot most of the time. In this case, it was to get it out of nursery soil into bonsai soil to get it developing faster. So this is pretty good in this pot. The soil is nice and solid. When I poke it in, the chopstick in there, it takes effort to get it to the bottom of the pot. And that's how you know that it's chopsticked in enough. If it still goes in nice or super easy, then it's not quite there. And right here, I can feel the potting soil. So I'm poking a little bit of the soil, the bonsai soil, into the potting soil, being careful not to damage the roots too badly while I'm poking it in there. And you can wiggle it, the chopstick, back and forth, or even in a circular motion, and that helps get some soil in there also. So this tree is set in this pot, and I'm gonna water it right now, right away, to get it set in this pot. And I know I've told you before, I use rainwater. That I have a horse trough, watering trough outside my greenhouse that I have goldfish in, and the rain fills it up, and I take the water out of there and bring it into my greenhouse into a water container, but I save it so it replenishes when it rains, and the goldfish do their stuff in there and make it fishy water, I guess. So it really helps with the trees. I've noticed that I don't have to use as much fertilizer by doing that. Then, as I'm watering it, what I'm looking for is water to come out the bottom of the pot. Now you can see it coming out of the bottom of the pot, and you can see it's dirty. So I keep watering until the water comes out either less dirty or clear, because I want to rinse all the tiny particles out of the soil so that they don't block up the soil. Because you want the water to run straight through the soil. Each time you water it, when the water stops going straight through the soil, you know it's time to repot. And the other way you know when it's time to repot is when the tree starts lifting, or the roots start lifting the tree out of the pot. That's another time that you can tell that it's time to repot the tree. So this, you can see there's an edge where the soil is below the edge. Some places it's above the edge. You can rub the top of the soil off also. There's a couple of roots that were exposed. That's why I built it up a little bit. But there's an edge around the side of the pot that keeps the soil in the pot. Once that lifts above the edge of the pot, you know it's definitely time to repot, and the water won't drain through the soil as quickly. So there we go with this tree, and this branch will start standing back up before the end of the day. It'll be just fine. One thing that I want to do with this tree now is I think I want to get this into a little bit better of a shape, because I've got some established branches here and here, and a couple up here on the top. This one is a brand new branch all the way from the base of the tree. This is all new. This is all new. This one here and this one here. Here, this one's all new. So you can see that this tree grows pretty rapidly. All these are brand new branches since it started to warm up. So what I want to do is I want to cut these back to the first secondary branch. So this would be a primary branch now because it's coming off the main trunk, and this would be a secondary branch. There's a big leaf and then a branch. I'm going to cut it back to the secondary branch. And I heard somebody ask if these have, if they die back. They do die back to the next branch. But they don't die back into the next branch. I guess I'm trying to explain it to where people can understand this. It will die back, but the part that you cut off from is the only part that will die. So I can cut this back all the way to this branch, and that branch right there will be fine. If something happens to that branch, it's not because you cut it back to it. Something else happened to it. So I'm going to cut this back to this first branch here. And also by cutting it right back to the branch, it allows the old branch to not be in the way of the new growth, and it will grow straighter out the branch. If you leave this up here, like the old branch, here, I'll show you right here. If I cut it off right here, and this piece will die back to here. If I leave this here, this branch is going to grow out this way, because that's just how these grow. It's going to grow outwards. Now if I cut this off, not cutting the leaf off there, if I cut this off to here, now this branch has a chance to grow outwards, and it will more likely grow outwards than upwards in this instance. Now this tree seems to be growing most of the branches out this direction of the tree instead of this direction of the tree, and that's very possibly because of the orientation in which this tree has been sitting in the greenhouse. So if I rotate this tree around in the greenhouse every couple of days, orienting the foliage in a different direction, it will help to pull foliage out the other side of the tree. And that's with pretty much any plant will do that. And it definitely helps with the sarissas. They're pretty susceptible to that. So I'm going to cut this one back to the first branch, because there's a whole bunch of more secondary branches down here, and this one's just sitting way above everything else. So I'm going to cut that one back to there. But now the rest of this foliage, I'm going to leave all the rest of this on here to help the tree to recover from this repot, so that it doesn't, so that it can create more roots. The more foliage you have, the more roots will grow, because the foliage creates the roots create the foliage. So if you've got a tree that has very, very little foliage and more roots, to a certain extent, I mean, you can go overboard on this, but if you have more roots, it'll quicken the time in which the foliage will grow. And if you have more foliage, it will quicken the time that the roots grow. Now, to make that happen, you have to maintain the watering of the tree. You have to make sure that the tree is watered on time, and make sure that the soil stays evenly moist. If you let it go too long, having more foliage will hinder the tree because it has more perspiration. So keeping the tree in a cooler area, not right in direct sun right after you repot it, is going to help that. So that will make the roots grow faster if you're maintaining it. And if you're not maintaining it, if you let it go too long without water, it will hinder the tree, and then you'll have a tree that's losing all its branches, like the first one that I showed you. That was also part of its problem. It didn't get enough water. I cut off too many roots for the size of the tree, and I wasn't able to maintain the soil being watered properly. So this tree, and I'll give you an update on this tree in a couple of weeks to show you that this process actually does work, and I'm not just saying it to say it. I'll show you. I'll prove it to you, because I've been working on these trees for about 6 years, and I've got a lot of them, and I've really been diligently learning about these trees as I'm growing them, watching videos, reading up on them, and taking care of a whole bunch of them. I've killed them, and I've kept other ones from dying that probably should have died. So there's that, and I will actually probably water this again this evening to make sure that this soil, I keep saying soil, to make sure that the soil stays evenly moist on this tree. Alright, so I'm going to put this one aside here. Alright, now I'm going to bring out one of my other sarissas. This is one that I've showed you before. And here is, this is the one that I've been working on to make more into a bonsai tree. I've got several of them that look like this still, little bitty guys. That's the kind of flowers these ones grow. The other ones, the fine leafed ones or the long leafed ones, they grow a white flower. These ones grow pink and white flower. And then, like I said, these ones are more of a broadleaf sarissa. Their leaves are more of a round shape than long, and they're variegated on this one that I have. I don't know if they're all variegated, but most of the pictures I've seen are. So I don't know if you can get these non-variegated, which would be kind of cool to get one that's not variegated also, just so that I can have more variety in my trees. So one of the biggest things that I have learned with the sarissa trees, you want to keep the weeds out of your trees. You want to keep all the weeds out of them. As often as you see weeds, take them out, because the sarissas, they need their water, they need their moisture, and having weeds in there, that takes away from that. So if you have a ton of weeds, and you're going to be watering your tree a lot more than you need to, because to maintain the moisture in the soil, because the weeds are drinking it up too. So keep that in mind. And I'm also pulling the weeds out so that I can show you something else here. So this is actually another tree that's growing. It is a gum tree. It's kind of cute. Don't want it in here. I got a couple of these started already. Got a couple of really cool gum trees. Actually, I'll show you those later this year once they start growing leaves again. I think I showed you one without leaves, but I'll show you this spring when they start growing leaves again. Okay, so here's what I wanted to show you. Right here, and here, here, here is new trees growing out of the roots. These grow trees out of the roots just like the other ones do. And if you have your sarissa in a pot where the roots are underneath the soil, it'll spring them out of the soil. So these ones, you can see it pulls clear back here to the roots way back over here. And you want to take these off because, like I said, these grow like 10 times faster than the tree does. So this amount of growth is, I would say, about a week, maybe 2, maybe 3, and this is a month or more than a month. That's like almost 2 months worth of growth. So it's catching up really quick. So we want to maintain the suckers, is what they call those. Maintain them, and that can also be dealt with while you're pulling the weeds, to maintain those and keep those out of the tree or off the tree so that the rest of your tree doesn't suffer from it. So yeah, this is coming along. This was one of a tree that I did a video not too long ago on. I let it go way too long in between cuttings or trimming, and it got really, really long internodes. Like you can see how short the internodes are right here, and then how long they are here. So the sooner I prune this back, the sooner or the better the foliage looks, right? So I'm gonna cut these off because these are growing too crazy. That's more than I need on this tree, because I want to maintain this type of foliage on this tree. So when I say these trees grow really fast and slow at the same time, that's what I mean. They'll grow a really long shoot really quickly, but then it takes a long time for this to develop. So when you get this to develop, you really want to maintain it, because it's really hard to get back to that type of foliage. And by cutting just the tip of the branch off, that kind of takes care of, or it takes care of it. It maintains it. So I'll give you guys an update on this later on when I update the other tree that I just showed you, to show you that by cutting those off, it helps to maintain the tree. And I'm hoping that next time I show you this, I can actually take the wire off of it and we'll see the tree nicely, or in the shape that I wanted to have the tree in the shape. It's starting to look really good. I'm really liking it. Definitely going to move these rocks out of the way. These are holding the tree up as I pulled it this way to bend this branch down. But yeah, it's starting to look really good. Sarissas are some of my favorite trees. The ficus benjamina and the sarissas are some of my favorites. I probably say that about all of my trees, because I like a lot of different types of trees. So yeah, and I think that's about it for what I have for information today. I hope it wasn't too much, too fast, and hope that you guys understood what I was talking about. I'll move the camera back a little bit. So that's it, I think, for this video. I appreciate y'all watching. I hope that you guys learned something. I hope that I didn't overwhelm you with information by talking too quickly, because I had an energy drink this morning and kind of wound up. It's kind of nice, actually, to be wide awake today. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's going to do it for this video. And I'll update you on the trees that I worked on today to show you what I did was actual information and not just me thinking that I know what I'm talking about and not having anything to back it up. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully you guys are doing well with all your trees, and hopefully you're learning something on how you're taking care of your trees. Leave a comment, and I'll see you on the next one.